Welcome back again to our series of short videos which will show you how to work with ImageLab. And our topic today is how to set up the colors and a few of the most important properties of hyperspectral images. So if you're looking at the 2D imager, you see here the image and of course the spectrum at the right. And if you want to set up the colors, then you just click the icon here which opens the color dialog. And this dialog not only lets you set the colors but also a few very basic parameters concerning the type of the display. So for example, you could switch from the color surface to dotted isolines, and of course you could also display the pixels. So the pixels are the data values which have been displayed without any interpolation. Normally we're working with interpolated color surfaces because they are easier to look at and easier to recognize structures in those interpolated images. And if you look here in the color dialog, you see here a few predefined colors, and those predefined colors you can easily select from, and if you just select, you see immediately the effect. And of course there are also user-defined colors, and the principle behind user-defined colors is quite simple. You edit and define a color palette which basically consists of 500 colors arranged in a linear array, and those colors in this linear array, called a color array, this color array is used to render the images. So if you use a user-defined color, then of course you have to specify which one. Those user-defined colors can be set up by yourself, so simply select a color scheme from your own selection of colors, and I will show you how to edit a user-defined color in a few moments. But first of all, I just wanted to point you to a fact which is quite important for this. Just let's go back to the black and white image, and what you see is that in the upper part of this dialog you see here that there is a histogram, and this histogram displays the intensity distribution of the pixels of the image. So what you see here is that there are lots of pixels at the lower intensity and very few pixels at the higher intensity. And the important point is now that if you want to adjust the color mappings, you simply take these boundaries, move the slider of this boundary, and you immediately see the effect in the image. The idea behind is that if you just take those two sliders, then the entire color map, as it is shown here, is projected onto the image using those two thresholds. And of course, if you just make those two thresholds narrower, then you get a higher contrast, and if you make them wider, you get a more flat image. If you just get lost and do not know how to get back to a suitable color setting, just click here the auto color range, and this will set the thresholds in a way that most of the pixels are within these two boundaries. Now let's go back to the user-defined colors. In order to create a user-defined color setting, you should use the color palette editor. The color palette editor consists of a list of available color palettes which you may already have defined, and if you click any of these entries here, you get the corresponding color scale here. and I will show you how to change or how to create new color scales. So the basic principle for creating color scales is quite simple. There are so-called pivot points. Those are reference points which are used to interpolate the color scale between those reference points. So I just clear the existing pivots and then create, for example, a new one here. So I'm moving the color cursor to this location and right click and select the command pivot color. And you see here the small white triangle, and this triangle indicates that this color is a pivot color. By default, the first color and the last color are always pivot colors, and there is also now this additional pivot color, and you could create any number of reference points within this color scale and assign a color to each of those reference points. So to move between the pivots, you could just use the arrows here, and you see here if I click, then the cursor moves. So I just start with the first pivot, assign a color by double clicking the hex code and select any color I want. Then I move over to the next pivot and double click the hex code and select whatever color I want. Maybe I just use a white color. So what we have here is a white color as the last one, some kind of orange in the middle, and starting with a black color. And now just click Interpolate Colors, and this will interpolate from the black reference point to the orange reference point to the white reference point. And in this way you can create any kind of color setup. And now if you're satisfied with it, you just save it. For example, we maybe should just call that orange. And now we have it available in our color property dialog.